So happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation and for connecting you all. So my name is María Crosas, and I'm basically working at the conversational artificial intelligence team at Nestle. And today I want to talk about improving performance on the intent detection. This is going to be today's agenda, or the topic that I would like to cover. So first of all, what Nestle is doing on digital, because we're not just producing coffee or chocolate. Then I want to talk about the basics or the core of a chatbot, which is the natural language processing and the intent classification. So basically, this makes the difference between a good versus a dummy bot. Then, in order to measure success of our chatbot, there are several tools out there that help us to analyze and visualize the chatbot's performance, and I want to talk about that as well. And then some chatbots that are just launched but have never been enhanced. In order to avoid that, I want to give some nice-to-have features to include to your chatbot, such as the A/B testing or the user feedback. And then lastly, I want to talk about some tips on how to improve your chatbot experience. And I'm just going to be talking about artificial utterances and topic extraction. So we are Nestle, we are producing coffee, we're producing chocolate amongst other things, but we're also digital. And it's kind of surprising when people ask that. And let me give you an overview of the team where I'm working with. So in 2016, a digital hub was created in Barcelona. And the scope was to present or to offer business-to-consumer solutions to markets across the world. And why that? Because we want to avoid duplication of efforts and we want to facilitate sharing of knowledge. So think about, for instance, an app, a website, or a chatbot that it's built in the US, and the same use case it's built in South Africa. So we can share technologies and learnings and avoid each market to have to start from the scratch and build everything without any help. So we are around 150 digital experts, always growing. And then we are about 26 nationalities, which is pretty interesting. And there's a strong diversity, gender balance, and the average age is 32. So based in Barcelona, within this team, the Digital Hub, we've got the conversational artificial intelligence team, which is the one that I belong to. We're basically focused on chatbots and voice experiences. And you can see now on the screen some of the projects that we have worked on, not all of those. You can see from here that we're covering more than 5 languages and mainly covering 2 consumer channels, which are Facebook Messenger and the website. Why that? Because you basically are where our consumers are on their preferred messaging apps. So we are not going to other ones, not because we don't want to, but mainly because it's where our consumers are approaching us. And the limitation on the languages is mainly coming because of the platforms. But we are always trying to include more on our portfolio. Regarding use cases, we are covering a wide range of use cases. So from pre-purchase advice to product recommendations, such as the recetas Nestlé you can see now in Mexico. It's about recipe recommendation, capturing leads, or even machine troubleshooting, for both Nespresso or Nescafé Dolce Gusto. Then we also talk about promotional bots. So bots that are basically alive for 6 months. Or we also work on long-term chatbots that aim to engage with the consumers and at the new channel to communicate with them. So it's a kind of a brand awareness decision, but not as a just test and learn, but actually to create a new channel and be able to approach consumers from this specific channel. And from all these projects, we have shared some learnings, and we want to share also this with you and how can you improve your chatbot experience. So let's just start with the content itself. So when we're building chatbots, we're basically building those because we want to either help agents from our team and free up time so that this can focus on other projects or prioritization, right? So these chatbots, as human as possible, we need to engage with our consumers on their preferred messaging apps. It can be Facebook Messenger, it can be WhatsApp, it can be Twitter, and so on. So in order to do that, we need to be able to talk with humans as humans. So we need the ability to understand human conversations and the ability to predict what they want to say. When we're building a chatbot, it's basically composed by what the prediction of what users will say. And this is what we call intents and the answers that we're getting from this chatbot. So for instance, if I have a coffee chatbot, and I kind of predict that people will say, I need to buy a capsule. So this will be an intent, and then you would gather the reply from the chatbot. For instance, here are the most or the top 5 capsules that you can buy. To achieve this understanding of human language, what do we need? So we need an accurate natural language processing engine. This is basically the chatbot's core. And this is what distinguishes a dummy chatbot versus an intelligent chatbot. And how can we actually achieve that? There are several ways, but if we work on an extended training set and a correct classification of these intents, we're basically gonna achieve the most of it. So the natural language processing is a classifier, and as a good classifier, the more training set or the more examples that you give to the chatbot, the better the results will be and the better the performance will be. Of course, what happens if it doesn't work? Well, I'm pretty sure that most of you have tried or some guided dialogues or some guided chatbots where you click on buttons. Either it can be carousels or it can be quick replies. And the bot is not understanding you when you're trying some kind of free text. Or it's understanding you, but it's pretty limited, right? So this basically leads to some frustration and to a poor and robotic conversation. So basically, we are failing to understand and communicate with our users. And there's a very thin line between chatting and using an app or using commands as questions and answers. So we need to distinguish what the chatbot is versus what an app is. How can we make sure that our bot is actually succeeding? So on the one hand, you've got some tools that are telling you when the chatbot has understood the question and when it hasn't. So when it hasn't, it sends all these sentences to the not understood or to the default intent. So you can see here on the screen now a graph that is actually distinguishing between understood queries and not understood queries. So it's basically taking into consideration about the yes or no understood rather than if I understood this properly. So what does it mean? On the other hand, we do have platforms that tell you if the intent has been correctly classified. Here's an example of Chatbase, but there are many others that you can see out there. So on the screen, you can see the most typical conversational flow and where the consumers are dropping off from this conversation. So these kind of graphs are not staying on the first level of classification, but rather they break down all the intents. Let's take a look at this. So when I'm starting this kind of a conversational flow, I go to the greetings, the start, and then let's say I want to just book a hotel, and then I go to the next intent. But then we see that people are dropping off from there, most of the people. So it would probably mean that I haven't understood what the consumer wanted, and I do need to redefine this intent. So this is just taking a look at the first intent, but you can see this with all the intents that you have actually created on your platform. So the challenge here is basically the correct classification. So are we making sure that our chatbots are being correctly classified or just classify itself? Let's talk about now some kind of a nice to have features and tips that I wanted to give to you. The first one is the A/B testing. So you can actually do that on the pre-implementation phase and test how consumers will react to your chatbot during the testing phase. So just to summarize, you would have like the preparation phase where you create all the content, and then you would build this, so the implementation phase. Then you would train it, and you will launch it, and then you would enhance it, right? So you can either test it on the testing phase, or you can go to the post-launch when you want to add the new feature. Let's put an example. I do have a coffee recommendation bot that is already live, and I want to add a new flow, which is, for instance, the machine troubleshooting with the 5 top problems that I've seen that people have, and I've seen this information on the website or any other social media channel. So what I would do is I would train the natural language processing, and there are some out there that actually allow you to do that, like for instance, Microsoft Lewis, but there are many others, then I would present these two models to the consumers and see which one is performing better. Once I have analyzed all these results, I would stay with the one that has been better trained, and I would apply to the upcoming projects. Another example is the user feedback. Just to see if the chatbot is performing well, you can go to, or you can review all the conversations between the chatbot and the consumer. Of course, you can do that manually, but you can actually ask the user to tell you that. So how can you actually do that? So you would basically include a feedback question on the yes or no after some intents. You're basically sampling the user to measure the bot's performance. So this is what we have done, for instance, with Nespresso. We included yes or no, did that help you correctly? And we are using that to train the bot, and we show to the bot what works and what doesn't work. You can do that for all the intents, or you can just select the specific ones you want to enhance. After that, you can either add this to the existing bot performance metric, or you can create a separate one just to not mix metrics. And this is what we actually did for Nespresso. We did a separate one because we wanted to track if the intent classification was working properly or not. Let's talk about now how can we actually improve our chatbot. There are several ways. Let's talk about artificial utterances. So we already said that the natural language processing is a classifier. And as a good one, the more examples, the better the performance will have. We can actually use natural language generation services to do that. So basically, from a seed, you would automatically create hundreds of sentences and tag intents that the bot must recognize. So going back to the example of the coffee chatbot, I actually want that to have a flow that scales machines. So I can come up with 4 or 5 sentences that consumers might ask, or I can basically use this service and create hundreds of sentences. I can do the same for selecting coffee. This is also helpful because basically it's helping you not only because people are talking several ways, but also because you might launch the chatbot on a place that English is not the main language, but you still want to use the chatbot in English. So you can actually use this for dialects or for even like tricking, doing some tweaks on the sentences itself. So from this, how can this help us? So on the pre-implementation phase, basically because if you remember, I was talking about intents. So when you would have an intent on the scaling machine, you can either put these 5 sentences manually, or you can just upload all these hundreds of sentences there and have a bigger training set. And you can also increase the effectiveness on the training and for performance phase. So let's say you launch the chatbot, and then of course you need to train. So probably the chatbot would understand better the consumer, and the number of unclassified intents or sentences that the bot is not able to recognize would be fewer. Another thing that you can do to improve your chatbot is the topic extraction. So once you have launched a bot, you would be able to see if the consumers are asking for information that the bot doesn't have. So when you're building a chatbot, there are several intents. Let's say coffee selection, coffee buy, the greetings, the where to buy, and so on. And you always have the default intent. So the default intent is where all the conversations that the bot didn't understand, it's been stored there. So you can either review those manually, which can be very tedious for a person, or you can actually apply methods to clean the text and identify what people are talking about. There are several models or several techniques that you can do. So for instance, let's say I have this Excel sheet with hundreds and thousands of rows of a brand, and I've got how people are communicating with my brand from several channels. Basically, it can be complaints, or it can be either just a random question. and I want to know if my chatbot has actually covered all these topics or not. So I can apply some of these topic extraction, and I can see some of the keywords. So from here, I see that my consumers want to know where to buy some products, or they're really interested to buy online through the website, but they don't know how. Or for instance, that they want to know about a specific brand. So applying this technique can actually help me only to visualize, but to see if I need to do something else to improve my chatbot. How can this help me? So basically, once you launch the chatbot, it's not the last thing that you're going to do with the bot. Actually, it's when everything starts. You basically need to listen your audience in order to improve and enhance the chatbot. So if you listen to your audience, to consumers, you're going to discover new use cases that you probably didn't know, or you didn't want to cover on phase 1, but you need to put on phase 2, because basically these are being demanded. You can add new flows or even new features. So for instance, I do have a coffee recommendation chatbot, but then most of our consumers are asking on a store nearby, and I haven't added this, but my consumers are demanding for that. So I should be able to add this based on what consumers are saying, because sometimes internal tests are not enough. Lastly, I wanted to share with you some metrics. This is a chatbot that was launched last year in Philippines on Facebook Messenger. So as you can see here, they're pretty good ones. It's also important to see if actually you promoted the chatbot or not. So the metrics are going to be super different. You can either launch a chatbot, do not promote it, and see how it performs with the users that are actually going to your brand because they are loyal or because they wanted to talk to an agent. This is going to give you a first understanding, but then after the promotion, you can actually see if the metrics are increasing. You can do that on several ways. You can do that adding a plugin on the website, or just the Facebook chat, customer chat, or even some kind of email promotion. And this is going to basically increase most of the traffic for your bot. Another thing that we learned from this project is that you need to target your audience. Going to everyone is most of the times the easy path, but then you're not going to be able to support or to provide on a specific problem, or to solve a specific problem for your audience. And another thing that we also discover is that is a channel. So even though Facebook can be more sexy, or even can be easy to implement because it has all these visuals and GIFs and buttons, maybe it's not the best channel for you. You need to see where your consumers are. If those are accessing from the website, maybe you need to implement the chatbot on the website. If those are on Twitter, maybe you need to do that. Like, don't rush to the Facebook Messenger just because it's the easy one. I would highly recommend looking at the documentation that your community manager has and can provide you before actually taking any decision on consumer channel, or even on the bot script itself. So this is everything on my side. I just wanted to thank you all for attending this conference, and of course I'm going to be here some minutes to reply to any questions that you might have.
Yeah, perfect. Great, thank you very much. And yeah, we have some questions and comments beside the ones that greetings from all over the world. For example, let me show this one. For example, Ali wants to know, good content. How about super intense and sub intense? Let's say intense, which can be broken into sub intense.
That's a really good one. Of course, you can have sub intense, and the only thing here, you need to be careful, because you have to ask yourself why you're doing that. Is it because it's very difficult to add a new flow? Is it because it's easier for you, or you want to drive the consumer through that way? So at the end of the day, it is technically possible. I'm not saying it's not. I would highly recommend you to begin with a decision tree that gives you a better understanding of what you want to achieve. And then you might need super intense, you might need sub intense, but just think that at the end of the day, a consumer that might not be super familiar with digital is going to use your chatbot. So you might just want to use basic intense and just give it a try, test and learn, and then use it on the face too.
Okay, perfect. Then we have some other questions. For example, Claire wants to know, I just showed the question here, are the users mainly asking for advice, support, or buying products?
That's a good one. So we've got about people asking for advice, for instance, pregnancy advice. The one that I was showing on the screen is Nestlé Infant Nutrition Philippines, and there were like mothers that were pregnant and they wanted to look for advice during their pregnancy period. Then we do have also around support. So for instance, Nescafé Dolce Gusto, the ones that we launch, it's about product and machine recommendation, but I get as well support. So I have set up my machine, but my machine is not working. So there's some troubleshooting there. So basically we do give them support and buying products as well. So the one I was showing around recipes, it's recipe recommendation, but at the end, the ability to buy a product is there, the same as some Purina case. So we're helping you to find the best product for your pet. And at the end, we're bringing you the possibility to buy this or to get a coupon. There are several ways, but we are covering most of these use cases you're mentioning.
Okay, perfect. Then let me check. Yeah, we have like one left, I would say. Yeah. PJ Veri wants to know approximately how big would your team need to be to implement a custom chatbot for a company?
Are you asking about if you're the company, how many people are needed to build the chatbot? I guess this is a question. There are several profiles that are needed here. I would talk about a developer, of course, either in-house or if you don't want to have it in-house, you can actually hire it. Then we're talking about the community manager, because the content, you need to know what the audience wants. Then we're talking about an analyst, a data analyst, because you basically need to see if the content makes sense. Then we're also talking about some kind of linguistic profile, because you're trying to get the bots as humans are possible. So you basically need someone that kind of talks the same language as consumers. And we're also talking about, well, there are several profiles, but then there's the product manager, there's the brand manager. So the brand manager knows the content, knows the brand, and they're going to be able to tell you what happens, what's important, what's not important. And the product manager will be the one that takes the control of the chatbot product itself. So it's very risky to say a number. You can have a team, just 3 people, and then just have everything outsourced. It can be between 3 and 5, or you can have up to 10, depending on your budget, actually.
Cool. Yeah, I think we had some other questions, but we are running already out of time. And thank you very much for your insights, Maria. Thanks for your questions and comments. And now we are switching to the next session. So you just need to log into the next webinar. We will be live in about 5 minutes again from New York, I hope. We will see. And yeah, Maria, all the best. And
thank you.
Yeah, have a great evening.
You too. Talk soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.